Welcome to Post-Gazette Live. I'm Paul Zeise, and of course, we do it every night at 5 o'clock. Post-Gazette Live, we like to talk about the topics of the day. We'll talk about the Steelers. We'll talk about a lot of different things. And, of course, there were probably two items of big news today that are worthy of discussing, and both revolve around the world of college football. One somewhat local, the other one obviously with a very familiar name. For years and years and years and years, when it comes to the Steelers' biggest nemesis, it was Bill Belichick and company, obviously. Bill Belichick and company with New England for years and years and years gave the Steelers fits. Their record against the Steelers, Belichick and Brady, was pretty amazing, actually. His record, even I think, the year after Brady retired or whatever, actually went to Tampa. They played, and somehow the Patriots figured out a way to beat the Steelers. Bill Belichick is a guy who people here hate and blame for, cheating in what was it, 2001 and 2004, or whatever the 2 years were, the AFC Championship game. The Spygate games, Hines Ward, Chris Hoke, a number of people like that really believe that they cheated and all that other good stuff. And so Steeler fans have usually had a very healthy disdain for Bill Belichick and the Patriots and Tom Brady and all things New England. Of course, it would have helped if the Steelers would have beat them a few times. I'm sure that the Steeler fans and the Steelers wouldn't hate them as much as they do. So to me, I look at what we're talking about here when it comes to the Patriots and Bill Belichick, and I am interested in what Steeler fans think about Bill Belichick becoming a college coach. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. I mean, he's 72 years old. 10 years ago, I would have told you this was going to be an absolute disaster. 10 years ago, I would have said there's no way a 72-year-old can go in, especially in a place like North Carolina, and have success and, be a guy who is going to resonate with kids and be able to recruit and all the other stuff you need to do as a college football coach. I'd have said 10 years ago, no way. But college football has changed. And quite frankly, the model that North Carolina is using right now is probably going to become the model of many teams as they try and figure out the new world of college football. And that motto is you're going to have a general manager. You're going to have somebody almost like a capologist type who understands roster management and all that stuff that goes along with, paying players essentially. You're going to need somebody, probably guys that are scouts, much like in the NFL. I mean, forget about your recruiters that are going to go out and recruit high school players. You're going to have to hire a few scouts that go and watch other college programs and try and figure out who they are that can play for you. That, the transfer portal every year when it opens up are the guys that you want to see their name in it. So college football is changing in that way. And what North Carolina did here with Bill Belichick is they are basically taking a shot at trying to be ahead of the curve. So if you look at what they've done with Bill Belichick, obviously a big financial commitment to bring him in. Five-year deal, $50 million, 30 of it guaranteed. The first 3 years fully guaranteed. And so first thing they did was made a financial commitment in a guy who obviously has had a lot of success in coaching, right? Then if you look at it from that standpoint, the next thing they did, they took their NIL collective up to $20 million. They gave him $10 million a year to hire assistant coaches. They added an additional number of staff, like ancillary staff positions, for him to fill, which I would assume are going to be scouts and analysts and all that other stuff. And the bottom line is they went out and hired Michael Lombardi to be the general manager of the football program. This is the model of college athletics. This is what it's going to be. So I've heard people say, well, Bill Belichick, how's he going to recruit 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds. How's he going to be able to relate to these guys? You know what? It's not the same as it used to be. It used to be, the cult of personality of the coach was a really essential item when it came to recruiting. Now it's about what can you pay players. And the bottom line is he'll bring out guys, he'll have guys on his staff who can relate to the players and all that other stuff. I'm sure they'll hire some young people that'll keep up to date with all of the social media stuff and all of the different, cutesy little things that these young people all want. I'm sure that'll all happen. I'm sure it'll all come to fruition that way. And so it feels to me like if you look at the landscape that we're talking about, the North Carolina has done it sort of the right way. Now, will it work? I don't know. But I would have told you 10 years ago, there's no chance it's going to work. It's a terrible idea. Bringing an NFL coach is, if you look really across the landscape of college football, it hasn't worked out very well for almost anywhere that you look. It's hard to make that transition. But the thing is, college football is becoming a lot more like the NFL than people want to admit. And so, when I hear things like North Carolina is going to give him $10 million for assistance, they're going to allow him to add like a bunch of ancillary staff that aren't coaches, but are, like analysts and ops guys and all that other stuff. They're going to give him a general manager who, so they've made a financial commitment to a general manager. They've made $20 million commitment to NIL. That's what you have to do to win, and, schools like Pitt, if they don't figure out how to keep up with that, they're going to fall way behind. Because that's a big, big financial commitment that University of North Carolina made. If you really look at what they've done, $50 million for him, $50 million for his coaches. That's just the coaching staff. Another $100 million. So another $100 million for NIL over 5 years. That's $200 million they've invested. And then they've got all the other stuff that they've put into it. We're probably talking about a commitment of about $250 million over the course of the next 5 years. If you're a school like Pitt, that's very difficult to keep up with, but you got to figure out a way to do it. Because this is the wave of college football. Now, will it work with Bill Belichick? I don't have a crystal ball. Bill Belichick obviously is a great coach. I think he's ahead of the game when it comes to, defense. I think he's a genius in many ways on defense. I get it, that he hasn't had a ton of success without Brady, but reality is, he's a really good football. You don't win 6 Super Bowls if you're not a great coach. I don't care how good your quarterback is, especially since at least the first 3, 2 definitely, and maybe 3 were all about their defense and special teams anyway. When they beat the Steelers in 2001, it had nothing to do with Brady. In fact, the most important pass of the game was thrown by Drew Bledsoe. So my point is, I get it that people like to try and poo-poo what he did and say, well, you don't win 6 Super Bowls if you don't really know what you're doing. And I don't want to hear about Spygate and all other garbage because it's silly. What he was doing with Spygate, every team was doing it in some way or another. The Deflategate thing was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They won the game, I think, 45-7? But yes, it's because there was 0.5 less PSIs in a football or something. Again, I get it. I understand why Steeler fans hate Bill Belichick. I don't necessarily disagree 100% with him, but I'm one of those people that I can give a guy props if you win 6 Super Bowls. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get it done in college. It'll be interesting to see if this model works. This is the model every school is starting to look at and say, this is what we have to do. Even Pitt, I know Pitt has talked about hiring a general manager for football. I think every school is starting to really try and figure out, okay, it's no longer about your facilities and your coach. And, it's no longer about all that stuff anymore. It's not about that anymore. It's about really how much can you pay your players? That's what it really is. And so I would say if you look at that piece of it all, I don't know, but it's going to come down to, do they evaluate the right guys, give the right guys the money? Because he'll be able to build a roster. It's funny. Back in the day, it used to be college athletes, they wanted to know about the facilities and the bells and the whistles and all the other stuff. Now, they don't care. They want to know, how much is your NIL collective? How much money are you going to pay me? What am I going to get to sign up to come to play for you? That's what they're going to get. That's what they care about. That's all they care about. Similar story, obviously not quite as intriguing as Bill Belichick going to college, especially, because he's in the ACC, so Pitt will have to play against them, is Rich Rodriguez returning home to West Virginia. Now, let me just say this. If you don't like Rich Rodriguez because you're a West Virginia fan, you don't like the way he left, okay, fine. You don't like Rich Rodriguez because, well, he blew that Pitt game. The last game he coached at West Virginia, he blew that Pitt game, and they could have won a national title. Okay, I'll listen to that. You don't want to say you don't like Rich Rodriguez because when he went to Michigan, he badmouthed the school a little bit and probably burned his bridges by some of the things he said. Okay, I'll listen to that. But if you're going to tell me that you don't think Rich Rodriguez is a good football coach, or that he hasn't, that he's been very overrated and all this other stuff, I'm not going to listen to that because that's stupid. Flat out stupid. I wrote a column about it today in the Post-Gazette. It's flat out stupid if you don't understand that Rich Rodriguez is a really good football coach. West Virginia, forget about, he's from Grant Town and he played for West Virginia and he was a walk-on and he played for Don Nehlen and, he's, loves West Virginia and he's one of them and all this other stuff. Forget about all that crap. All that is just sort of icing on the cake. The best thing about this hire for West Virginia, they hired a really good football coach. And the idea that, well, he's old and over the hill or has been, he just got done winning the Conference USA championship with a team that, by the way, 2 years ago was an FCS team. I mean, 2 years in FBS from FCS, 2 years in FBS, they've gotten to a bowl game. They've won 2 out of the last 3. He was there 3 years. He won the conference title twice. What are we talking about here? The guy can coach. And the fact that he's still winning now and just coming off the season that he's coming off tells me he's still young enough. He's still got the passion. He's still got all that other stuff. But much like the conversation we just had about Bill Belichick, all of it comes down to, are they going to be able to raise enough money so that he can recruit at a level that he can bring in players to go win? Because that's what it's all about nowadays. This idea that, it's college football and still college, they're still amateurs. No, they're not. No, they're not. And I can tell you, if you talk to any coach, they'll tell you the first thing that out of the mouth of every recruit, they pick up the phone and call them. It's not, well, what are your facilities like? What is your academic programs like? How much are you going to pay me? So bottom line, if Rich Rodriguez is going to have success at West Virginia, he's a really good football coach, but I don't care how good you are. If you don't have players, you will not win. And the way you get players in college football now is you buy it. It's why certain programs are starting to fall behind, and other programs that maybe were buried way back in the day are actually going to have a chance to get ahead because they have access to funds. To me, there's no better example of that than SMU. SMU basically told the ACC, listen, for the next day, I think it's 8 years or 10 years or whatever it is, we don't need your TV money. We don't want any of it. We don't need anything from you. Just let us in. Give us the access that being in the ACC does. Okay, sure, we'll do that. They literally left like $400 or $500 million on the table, and within 48 hours, SMU raised that. That's what it takes. And they've got all those billionaires down there, the oil and gas money. SMU is going to be good every year, not because I think they've got the greatest coach ever, but because they're able to go out and buy players. That's the same thing with West Virginia. It's the same thing with Bill Belichick. Obviously, North Carolina has made it very clear because they put it all out there, how much they're paying. They're going to pay. They're going to put money in, they're going to put money into it, and they're going to go after it. It sounds like one of the reasons that West Virginia went to Rich Rodriguez is because a lot of the big dollar donors want him back. And there are guys like Pat McAfee, for instance, who want him back. And so the bottom line there is, if they're going to write the checks, West Virginia's going to be good. If they're not going to write the checks, West Virginia's not going to be good. But spare me the idea that Rich Rodriguez isn't a good coach, because he's a very good coach. And quite frankly, he's had success pretty much everywhere he's gone. So there's that. Those were the two big news items of the day. Rich Rodriguez to West Virginia, obviously, and Bill Belichick going to North Carolina. A lesser extent, but very similar, Dan Mullen, who was a really pretty successful coach in the SEC at Florida and Mississippi State, he just got hired by UNLV. And why? Because he's convinced their NIL collective is going to be able to raise the kind of money he's going to need to build a team. And if that happens, he's a really good coach. He's a very good offensive coach. He's a very good play caller. He's going to have success. But again, it is very, very, very simple when it comes to college football nowadays. It's all about the money. And I hate to say it like that. There are still purists out there who don't believe that. I'm telling you, it's all about the money. 100% about the money. So there's that. Those were the news items for the world of college football. Now let's move on to the Steelers. There's a very interesting question that's being bandied about, apparently, with respect to the Steelers. And I think that, these are the kinds of things that when we get late in the season, you start to ask questions like this because, you know what, we're all just sort of waiting. We're all just sort of waiting for the playoffs to start now. It's pretty clear that the Steelers are going to make it. And I think that it's really very clear that the Steelers are probably going to have a very good, what I would call seed and maybe even a decent path to get to where they need to get to. So it'll be interesting to see now where it goes from here. It's amazing, but there is some discussion about Cam Heyward, and I think Cam Heyward has had a really, really good season. The question is, though, it's one of those things that I would say probably because of his positions, probably because of the position he plays, I just don't know that he's going to have enough stats. I'm pulling up his stats right now to really be in the conversation to win the award. I think he's having a spectacular year. But again, one of the things about that award, they seem to really value high impact plays like sacks and everything else. And looking at him right now, if you look at Cam Heyward, he has 8 sacks. Put that into perspective, TJ Watt has 9.5. So he's second on the league, second in sacks on his own team. Tackles for loss, he's got 10. TJ Watt's got 17. He does have more passes defense than TJ Watt, but let's see. TJ Watt has, where's it at? Forced fumbles, 5, and he has none. So my point is this. TJ Watt plays outside, so obviously he has access to more stats than probably Cam Heyward does, those kind of high-impact stats. But I would say this. When we compare guys like that, there was always the ability to look at Aaron Donald's numbers and say, well, he plays inside. He's not an outside guy, so, his stat numbers aren't quite what the other guys are, but he still makes a lot of high-impact plays. I mean, again, Aaron Donald was putting up pretty big numbers of sacks too. I mean, he was a wrecking crew. And I think that it's really, really difficult for him to break into that club. That's not to say that he is going to be able to. He's not somebody who shouldn't be at least discussed in those terms. Because this really is probably Cam Heyward's best year in a few years. He certainly doesn't look like a guy who is, nearing the end of his career. But again, if you look at all of his numbers, it really feels to me like the award is going to favor guys who are able to put up big sack numbers, who are able to put up big interception numbers, right? Those high impact plays that are sort of the plays that, what I would call the sports center plays. I think that's always going to be the guys that probably get rewarded the most. And I think that when you look at it like that, okay, Cam Heyward right now is, let me see where he ranks. He's 14th in sacks. Now you can say, well, he's an interior guy or whatever. So, that's not quite fair to compare him to some of these other guys. And I agree with that. And I look at the guys ahead of him, but guess what? Dexter Lawrence is also a tackle. He's a defensive tackle, and he has more sacks than Cam Heyward. And Dexter Lawrence, if I look at it here, he also has a forced fumble. Cam Heyward doesn't. That's only one, but my point is, if you want to compare apples to apples, Cam Heyward probably isn't even at the top of the list when it comes to defensive tackles. But this looks like the kind of award. I guess this year, if you look at it, Myles Garrett again is going to be in the discussion. TJ Watt will be in the discussion. Trey Hendrickson probably will be in the discussion, right? These are the guys that they look at and say, well, look at their numbers, yada, yada. The sack numbers are this, they impact the game this way. Interceptions, let's see, Xavier McKinney, Kirby Joseph, Byron Murphy Jr., these are guys that probably are going to be at least in the conversation, mostly because the people that do the voting on these kinds of things, they basically are going to look at those kind of big numbers and say, well, these guys have, big numbers in those categories. So I think that Cam Heyward should at least be in the conversation, but I don't know that he's going to be realistically in the conversation because, again, I think there are a number of guys that are ahead of him on the list. And I think that really what we've learned, what these voters all value, I think that's going to be, probably what is going against him. I think at the end of the day, his season, for those of us who have watched every one of his games, we probably understand how much he impacts the game, even when he doesn't make a big play, even when he doesn't make a high-impact sack, even when he isn't the guy that, gets the quote-unquote highlight number. We kind of know what he does play to play. But I just feel like that's the key. To me, that's the key. I think it's going to be really difficult for him to get him to put himself in that conversation. I just do. I don't know that it's fair, but I just know kind of how they do things. Now, when we look at the Eagles game this week coming up, and we're going to talk about this for a little bit here, the thing that both Mike Tomlin and a number of his players have talked about all week really is Saquon Barkley, who, boy, if you want to talk about the Giants making a colossal mistake, they basically backed Daniel Jones and moved on from Saquon Barkley, and all Saquon Barkley has done is put together an MVP kind of season. And with 4 games left, at his current pace, if he continues to do what he's doing, he's going to have a chance to rush for 2,100 yards. That's pretty amazing. But that's not even the most amazing thing, really. Not that he's averaging 125 yards a game. Not that he's ran for 1,623 total yards. It's that he's averaging 6.1 yards per carry. 6.1 yards per carry. Think about that. I just am amazed by that. As much as he runs the ball, he's still averaging 6.1 yards per carry. And so I think when you go from that, perspective, the Eagles have legitimately become a running team. Going back to what we talked about the other day, there was some anger or angst or whatever because by A.J. Brown because the passing game wasn't what it was, what he wants it to be and all that other stuff. Well, part of that is because they're handing the ball off to Saquon Barkley a lot. They're giving it to him because he's that guy. And what's funny is everybody in the league, they all know who's getting the ball. They all know what the Eagles are trying to do, and they haven't been able to stop it. the Steelers have sprung some leaks, this year again in the running game. There's been a few games where teams have been able to get off and run against them. And so this is going to be a great test to see if they have sort of fixed that, to see if they've gotten to a point where they're a little bit better than they've been in some games against the run. Because ultimately, the thing about Saquon Barkley is he's the kind of guy, the more he gets going, right, the better he's going to be. The more he gets going, the better he's going to be. Now, the Steelers have the number 4 run defense in the NFL. So overall, they've been pretty good. Some of that, again, has been because they've been ahead in a lot of games, and they've had teams have had to throw it more than they probably want to in the second half. But part of it is the Steelers have been pretty good at stopping the run at times. At other times, we've seen some guys run, and get big, long chunk yards against them. And the thing about Saquon Barkley is if he gets a crack and he goes through the line, there's probably a really good chance he's going to go, for a long run and a big, long play. So the Steelers have to be able to stop Saquon Barkley. And if they do, they'll have a good chance of stopping the Eagles, because the reality is the Eagles are a team that, despite all the discussions about Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and all the other stuff, the Eagles are a running team. They've become a running team. That's what they are. That's who they are. That's why there was even like the little rift that we saw between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. A lot of it has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts. A lot of it has nothing to do with the fact that, other than the Eagles run the football a lot more than they probably A.J. Brown or any receiver would want them to. But when your best weapon, by far, by the way, your best weapon is your running back, why wouldn't you? Especially when no team has really shown the ability to stop you. You might as well go out and do it the right way. So to me, I look at it from that standpoint, and I just say I think this is one of those games where, you know what, they have a real opportunity here to show that they can get to where they need to get to, because they're playing against one of the best rushing attacks in the football with one of the best running backs in football. And so given that, I think it's important for the Steelers to have a big game against Saquon Barkley. I really do. I just feel like he's such an important player and does so many different things that it's going to be just a really difficult assignment. But they're capable of doing it. That's the big thing. They're absolutely capable of doing it. And so we have to see now what's next with the Steelers. If they're able to stop him, can Jalen Hurts and company beat them? And that, I don't think, is something we know the answer to. I mean, it feels like it, right? It feels like it, but I just don't know if that's the case. Because, again, he hasn't been able to do that recently. And so I've never been a big fan of Jalen Hurts. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a great player. I think he's a good player, though. And I think that, you know what, the Steelers, if they do everything in their power that they can stop Saquon Barkley, I'll be very interested to see if there is the ability for Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown to beat the Steelers through the air. Clearly, that puts a little pressure on Joey Porter Jr., but reality is, you know what, he's got pressure anyway, because he's going to face the best receiver every single week. That's what you do if you're the number one corner. That's what you have to do. So I feel like, to me, there's a lot of moving pieces here in this game. I don't know that. I think some people are acting like it's irrelevant if they win or lose, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think you want to win this game. I get it. If you lose, it's an NFC game, and you probably weren't going to be the 1 seed anyway. But I think there's a lot that you can prove to yourself and maybe others by winning this game. That's really the key to me, is that there are some opportunities to go win the game. And I think that's really to me, go win the game. Go show you can, stop a guy like Saquon Barkley. Go show you can win on the road in a hostile environment. Go show that you can win without George Pickens. The game's always on Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's is the official chicken wing of the Archie's is the home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's. Enjoy your time while you're there at Archie's on Carson Street. They have all the games on Sundays. You could go down there. They have a big Eagles contingent. It's weird, but I think they have a pretty big Eagles contingent that goes and watches the games on Sundays. They have all the games Sundays, all the games Saturdays. Get down to Archie's. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the game. Until then, we'll do it again tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I'm Paul Zeise. You have listened or you have been watching. Thank you for tuning in to the daily Post-Gazette Live that we do. And hopefully, again, we will get you ready for Steelers. And
thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.